exact angle ratios. So for our first example, we have cosine 300, and the very first thing you should do, I'm gonna show you this two ways. I'm gonna show you how to use the calculator, and I'm gonna show you how to do it, without the calculator. First, let me show you without the calculator. So the first thing is you want to determine the quadrant, and that's based on the angle being 300. That is in quadrant 4. And then you want to use your ASTC, all students take calculus, to determine if cosine is positive in quadrant 4, which it is. So you know this is going to be positive cosine, and then along with ASTC, you need to remember your reference angle rules, and that is that in quadrant 2 you do 180 minus theta, 3 is theta minus 180, and 4 is 360 minus theta. So in this quadrant, we're using a 360 minus theta, and so we change this down to positive cosine 60, because 360 minus 300 is 60. Now, you know your answer is going to be a positive ratio, because that's why we put that plus sign in front of cosine. And cosine 60, now this is one of those special angles, the 30, the 45s, the 60s. These are the ones that you're expected to have memorized. Of sine, cosine, and tangent of 30, 45, and 60. So cosine 60 is 1/2. Now, with the calculator, it's pretty easy to do this. I'm just going to type in the original cosine 300, and it's telling me 0.5, which I know is 1/2, and it's telling me it's positive 0.5, so that's why I know it's 1/2. So the calculator is kind of a shortcut for a lot of these. 1/2 is a very recognizable decimal. The other decimals, with the radicals, are not as recognizable, but there are some that are maybe a little bit easier than others, and we'll talk about that probably in a moment. So let's look at our second example here. Sine 225. Sine 225, this is in quadrant, what is that, 3? It's between 180 and 270. And in quadrant 3, sine is negative. So we're going to have negative sine 220, or negative sine, we'll just say, and then I'll convert it. And in quadrant 3, you do your angle minus 180. That's what we have here. And so 225 minus 180 is 45. And again, this is something you're expected to know. Now you know your answer is going to be negative because we're sine in the third quadrant. And sine 45 is rad 2 over 2. Now, a lot of us get to the point where we do just kind of type these in and recognize the decimals. So sine 225. Now, even if you don't recognize the decimal, one useful thing about this is it tells us it's a negative ratio, negative 0.707. So you automatically know your answer is going to be a negative ratio. It's that 0.707 that you may remember is rad 2 over 2. So anytime you see that 0.707 come up, you kind of know it's converting to rad 2 over 2. And you could also test it, like I could test negative rad 2 divided by 2 and see if this is indeed that same decimal. And so I do know that they are equal. So the calculator is really helpful for a lot of that stuff. Now this last one is where the calculator can't do it all for you. You gotta kind of think about it a little bit. So first thing, cotangent 7 pi over 6. First of all, I think a lot of you will probably convert that to degrees to make it a little bit easier. Not that you need to, because I could tell 7 pi over 6 is a reference of pi over 6, and pi over 6 I know is 30 degrees. But not everybody has that memorized, so what I could do is change it to 7 times 180. Oops, didn't type that in properly. 7 times 180 divided by 6, and this will convert it to a degree of 210 for me. And let's see, I know 210, this is a quadrant 3 also, where cotangent is positive, so positive cotangent minus 180 from that, and it is 30, like I said before. But the other thing was recognizing that 7 pi over 6 is a reference of pi over 6, and that one I have memorized is 30 degrees. But anyways, we got positive cotangent 30, so I know my answer is positive, but cotangent 30 might not be one that I have memorized. But what I could do, and also if I type it into my calculator, it's probably not one I'm going to recognize. 1 divided by tangent 30, And the same thing as 1 divided by tangent 210. Now this confirms it's positive, but 1.73, that's not one that I have kind of memorized. Like I know 0.5 is 1/2, I know 0.707 is rad 2 over 2, and I know 0.866 is rad 3 over 2. But 1.732, that's not, you know, extremely common one. I don't have that one memorized, but I do know that cotangent is cosine over sine, because remember, tangent is sine over cosine. Well, cotangent is cosine 30 over sine 30. And these values I do have memorized. I know cosine 30 is rad 3 over 2. And I know sine 30 is 1/2. I'll say I don't remember that. Well, I can test it. Cosine 30 is going to be 0.866, and I need to remember that's rad 3 over 2. And sine 30 is 0.5. There's my 1/2. And so I have fraction over fraction. I change it to times the reciprocal of the bottom, 2 over 1, which ultimately ends up giving me a value of radical 3. And what I can test here is I know that 1.732 from before. Well, let's see if that is my answer. Rad 3 is the original decimal I had when I checked it before, so I know I am correct.